Not what I expected, but now I love you.
Hey, welcome back to the Church Staff Book Club. My name is Jonathan Malm.
My name's Jason Young.
And we are now on to chapter 5 of the book we're going through called Likeable Leader. It's a book that Jason and I wrote a little while ago. We've talked about every episode. This is like my least favorite book in that I don't like telling people that I wrote it, but it's honestly my favorite book that we wrote because I feel like the content is really good, especially in the reread. It's really just about how to be a leader that people want to follow. You know, it's not about being the person who's liked. It's not about, being that dynamic, charismatic leader, but really when we want our teams to just want to be able to do what we're asking them to do, we want them to be excited about working with us. We want them to actually give us their best. And this book really helps you do that. So it is a good book, but I always feel like I have to apologize a little bit for it.
I love the tension you talk about embarrassed to talk about it and yet proud to talk about it. And I think if you were to read it, you would understand, because the title of it, you're like, what are these guys really talking about? And then when you get into it, you're like, oh my word, this is practical, like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, especially on the reread, to your point, going back and reading it and the practical application, which I think that is our bent anyways. But I think if you're listening, watching right now, you're like, God, is this book for me? And I think if you lead paid staff or volunteers and you're like, how do I want to lead people that they love to follow and they give their very best. Well, maybe the question is well, what are you giving to them? And I love that's one of the things that we're talking about today is really something that you can give to them that is super, super helpful.
Yeah, it's really about supporting and investing. And it's not, I think our goal every time that we write a chapter is that we don't want to write what people expect us to write. So this idea of supporting, investing, yes, we should be encouraging them. We should be giving them appropriate tools, but we really go a lot deeper than that in this chapter about how to support and invest in your team. And the starting one, and this is something that's it's kind of simple, but it's not, is that let people use their systems. And I think as I was rereading this chapter, and the next chapter actually, I feel like it all comes down to letting people be rock stars.
Yeah.
Rock stars not in the egotistical sense, in the prima donna sense, but let them kill it at the jobs that you ask them to do. So that means giving them the tools where man, they're just going to kill it. They're going to just do a phenomenal job at their job because we gave them this resource or this tool, or we let them use the tool that they prefer to use. And that's kind of our first big topic in the chapter. Is the idea is we often like to fit people into our systems instead of letting people embrace their own systems. I mean, the simplest one of this is we do this a lot of times with Sunday Social is we bring in a designer and we're like, hey, you need to fit into the rigid structure of Photoshop. You need to use Photoshop because everyone on our team uses Photoshop. And it's frustrating because some people will use Affinity or Canva. Sorry, this is really technical, but they'll use different programs, right? We're sorry, we actually need you to use our rigid system because that's the product we deliver to the customer, right? But a lot of times I think we hey, you're going to need to use a Mac if you work on staff at our church, or you're going to need to use Photoshop, or you're going to need to use whatever system it is that we use. Makes it easier for IT. It makes it easier for, HR and for all of our purchasing processes. But sometimes I think we don't really support people in the things that they're best at because it just makes it easier for the organization.
Yeah. Yeah. And when I think about this chapter, support and equip, the idea, if you lead again, staff, paid staff, volunteers, it's this. Support says, hey, Jonathan, I'm with you, right? And you feel like, man, I've got somebody in my corner. But equip says, I'm going to give you what you need. And your volunteer, your paid staff person, they need both. They need to know you're with them and they need you to give them what they need. And that's why I love this chapter, because if you're trying to be a leader that's likable, again, not for your self-esteem, but to increase followership, we're going here, people have to experience both of those elements. And so you're right. When we think about what exactly they need, I love how we lay out these, the 5 things. And when we talk about, the tools, sometimes, if we're not careful as a leader, we can assume our people already know what to go find. We can assume that we have been clear. In fact, I flew in last night and I was leading some sessions this week with leaders around the idea of this very subject. It kind of applied in a different way. But I think sometimes as leaders, we think that we have been clear with what people have been given, only for that particular volunteer or paid staff person to walk away and not know what they've been given or what they have access to. And so what we hope in this chapter is that, what specifically have you given them from tools, time, training, the team, the people side of things, and authority and latitude, right? So we kind of work through some of these things. And one thing, I don't know for you, Jonathan, I have been guilty of this on more than one occasion. I have even felt this on more than one occasion with people that I have followed, is if you're looking at a result or you're looking at an outcome, and whatever the situation is, or whoever the person is, if they're not producing that result, there is a little bit of a default. You may or may not say this out loud, but you might feel this. It's like, what's wrong with them? Like, how hard is this? And there's this temptation to point in one direction. And I think what we want to do in this chapter is say, hey, slow your roll. What if you didn't do that first? What if you first asked yourself as the leader, which of these tools might actually be missing with that volunteer or with that particular staff person? Because remember this, when we lead people, just a book, a podcast, an article, a quick conversation, people need more than that. They actually need a model to follow. And we need this in humanity. We see a model so we could follow it. So really what you're demonstrating in and through this chapter as you support, in and through this chapter as you equip, is you're giving them a model so they have clarity to follow, but also so they can replicate with the people they lead. And so this chapter really does help set that up with these particular things that people need to accomplish whatever vision is in front of them.
Yeah, and you were kind of touching on this pretty clearly, that it doesn't necessarily, when we talk about supporting them with tools, it doesn't necessarily mean we buy them expensive products or expensive computers.
Oh,
or
yeah.
expensive, like,
Oh, yeah.
Like, because I think that maybe is some of the hesitation a lot of times, where it's like, our sound guy says he needs this one particular soundboard to be able to do his job well, right? Like, that, the reality is, like, first of all, that's probably not true. Like, you can do some really great stuff. Like, what is it? There's this old saying from one of these famous guitarists where it's like the tone is in the fingers, like the for guitar. Like, it's not necessarily about the equipment. Like, really great musicians can make even a bad sounding guitar sound good, right? Like, so there is this reality of, like, it doesn't necessarily mean expensive equipment, but what we're really talking about is supporting them in their role, giving them that encouragement, giving them that authority they need, like you said, giving them, honestly, thinking through what they need for them to do their job well. Honestly, putting time and effort into it. One of the things that I talked about in this chapter was the idea that, like, sometimes we need our people to see us working hard, even if we are working hard. Sometimes they don't see it. Whenever I worked at a church, there was this one facilities guy, and he was there like forever, right? And I just, his name was Ernie. I probably shouldn't say his name, but Ernie, right? And then my dad one day, my dad was a pastor, and he's like, hey, don't be like Ernie. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, the problem with Ernie is we get a lot of people to come alongside to help him with something that he needs to do, like a big project, and then Ernie will disappear. And what I knew about Ernie is Ernie's a hard worker, right? Ernie was probably going to do something else that needed to be done. He's like, well, great, these people got it covered. I'm going to go take care of this task and let them focus on the task that they're doing, right? But what it appeared to everyone who came to help Ernie is that Ernie was like kicking back and relaxing while they were doing all the hard work. And they're like, well, we're paying Ernie to do this. Ernie's the person paid to do this. Why are we doing all the hard work for him? And so there's this reality of, like, just because people don't see you working doesn't mean you aren't working, but sometimes people need to see you working. Sometimes people need to see you present in the thing. So like, when Christmas coming around and your tech team is like putting in, 16-hour days sometimes. That's the reality of working in, especially in a larger church where you have a lot of production elements. Sometimes you just need to show up, show up for 30 minutes. Even if you don't need to do anything, just be there, be present. I feel like that's one thing that a lot of leaders can do is just, just be there and say, hey, how can I support you? There's nothing you need to do. Like, it's all on them. This is all their job. But sometimes just your presence, sometimes just showing that you are engaged in the moment matters so much.
Yeah, there's a growing body of research out there. It's super interesting. And when I say this, we're like, we don't need research to prove that's true, but it goes to what you just said, that the research is around how powerful visible leadership is, especially in moments that they may not be making a contribution, but you are visibly there. And there's one particular leader I'm thinking of right now, and she has this incredible ability to show up at just the right moments. And I know she's insanely busy. And when she shows up, you don't want to be the leader that when you show up, people are like, what did we do wrong? You want to be the leader that when you show up, people say, man, I'm glad they're here. And so when she shows up, whether it's at just a lunch, not even to have lunch, just to show up and like, hey, Jonathan, Jason, what's going on today? And just long enough for you to feel seen and supported, a check-in, or maybe in the hallway or in random meetings. Like, but you know what? She doesn't do those things on accident.
Yeah.
She does those things on purpose. She looks for moments. She has margin in her day, even though she's busy. She realizes the power and the impact of visible leadership. And I think, to your point, paying attention to when and where and with whom is incredibly impactful.
Yeah, showing up and them not feeling like they're in trouble is huge. My dad is the master at this. So he runs this missions organization called Commission Every Nation. They have like 600 families around the world or whatever. And I think their goal is every 2 years, they want one of their pastoral team to be able to visit the missionary in the field, right? And so they do that. They have a whole team that's what they do. They travel to, this part of Asia, and they visit all the missionaries, and they just touch base. But what my dad has set it up to be is it's literally just a visit to encourage. And he regularly hears from missionaries. He's like, man, I was worried about you coming to check us out on the field, because we've previously been with missions agencies where it's like they're auditing us whenever they visit us on the field. And it feels like high pressure. It feels stressful. It feels like, oh, great. Now, we're trying to do this ministry, but now we have to report to these people. And like, we feel like we're in trouble, or we feel like we have to prove that we're producing value. Right. But they're like, it was such a refreshing thing that you just came to support us. You figured out what we needed. You were able to like communicate things back to the home office that we weren't able to communicate previously. Like, it was just a support system. And that's one of the things he regularly hears, is that like, wow, this is different than what I was expecting. Because it is like, oftentimes, sometimes you do feel like when your leader is around, you're like, oh, great. If I step out the wrong way, or if I do the wrong thing, like now I'm having to do my job plus try to make them, impressed with me, which is very stressful.
Yeah. You talk about just the support side, being present. I think a way, and again, we talk about these, tools of time. We talk about these 5 elements, but you said something that made me think about this. I was recently working with a group of leaders, and we were talking about internal drivers, motivators, right? People are motivated. We just have to figure out what motivates them. And so when you think about supporting and equipping, your team, again, paid staff, volunteers, one way that it could be easier is figuring out like what motivates them. For example, are they motivated by opportunities to grow? They love to grow their toolkit, their skill set, their mindset. They just value growth. They look at everything as a growth opportunity, right? Is that a driver for them? Is it community? Right? They really kind of do it with people. They rely on people. That's a really big driver for them. It could be empowerment, which is focused on giving them autonomy, right? So giving them enough clarity, but giving them the autonomy. And the last internal driver motivator is purpose. Like, are they really driven by an intrinsic or an internal purpose that aligns well with yours or the church's, right? And so understanding what motivates and what drives people can be really, really helpful to a person as you lead them, so you can speak their language. So it's a way that they feel like you're with them, is because you are acknowledging whatever it is that is motivating them or driving them. And then you could figure out, based on that, how to better equip them as they use their motivation or internal drivers to do whatever it is that is, trying to be accomplished. So when you said that, it just reminded me of one way to support is to understand what drives this particular volunteer or this staff person. And then I could show up more intentionally for them.
And you probably can't just ask them that, because I think most people don't necessarily know what motivates them.
Fair.
You have to watch them, and you have to watch them. What are they most excited about? Whenever, this is probably a good example, is like when they show up to volunteer or to work, what's the first thing they do? Are they going to their team and like dapping people up and high-fiving and like joking about the week, or are they like getting into the task? Like you can probably watch them. Leaders should be good. What's the term? Sociologists, but like the same things they do in the animal kingdom, where you just like watch, you document from afar, right? You just kind of watch. Sometimes, again, not to discipline, but you just kind of watch and see like, oh, this is what they're doing. This is the behavior that's happening right now. We need to be masters at that, and that just requires sometimes like slowing down what we're doing and just focusing on people. That's what, I don't know. I always feel like one of the hardest shifts that people make whenever they're becoming leaders for the first time is, when you were a volunteer, probably 80% of your time was spent doing tasks, and 20% of your time was spent, like meetings or kind of like talking to people. But then as you shift becoming a leader, it needs to be about 80% of your time focused on people and 20% of your time focused on tasks. And that's a really hard shift for people to make, because again, we talked about this in a previous episode, that typically the people that get promoted to leaders are the ones who are really good at doing a task. And it's tough because like you're a task doer, not a leader, and now you're having to suddenly lead people, and it's a big shift to make. I do want to talk about the idea, though. So we talked about the idea that a leader needs to be probably one of the hardest working ones on the team. But I will say, on the flip side, sometimes that means you need to be okay with being the hardest working person on the team, or you need to be okay with like perceiving that. Because I think about, especially in volunteer leadership, I don't know if we have volunteer leaders watching this episode, but a lot of times, if you're on paid staff, yes, you should be working 40 hours a week and your volunteers working 1 or 2 hours, right? Like that's how it should be. If your volunteers are working more than you as paid staff, that's a problem. But I know a lot of churches, you have volunteer leaders that they put in so much effort. They, they maybe make sacrifices at home. They maybe homeschool their kids so they can be more present at the church, or all these decisions that they make in life in order to make church a more central part of their life. And I've talked to so many volunteer leaders that get so frustrated that their volunteers, the ones under them, don't carry the burden as much as they do. They don't get it. They're not committed to the church as much as I am. And like the reality is, that's true. They won't be as committed. You are like a freak of nature in a good way. Like we love volunteer leaders that like surround themselves, surround their life around the church, but that is not the reality for most people. And you can't let that frustrate you. You have to realize that that's a specific calling that God has placed on your life, or maybe it's unhealthy. Also, we have both of those things, right? Like sometimes it's a very healthy calling God has placed in your life, and sometimes it's just like an unhealthy obsession with the church that you maybe need to back off and you're heading toward burnout. But we need to be willing to let other people act according to their calling, and we act according to ours. And I think that's I don't know, I feel like it's an important thing to bring up in this conversation.
What's interesting is if you've been the staff person and you have a volunteer that is available and shows up a lot and does a great job and wants to, the default is we just keep asking that one or those to do more. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but it's often the default because we know what we're going to get. We know it's going to be good. We know it's going to be on time. We kind of know these things, and our brain loves familiarity, right? Predictability, because it wants to have something safe.
Yeah.
Versus we have to look out sometimes for our own volunteers We have to distribute the responsibility and privilege of serving across more volunteers. Is it more work and harder work? For sure. Does it require more time? For sure. Welcome to leadership. It
Yeah.
is part of what we do. You don't want to be, and we, we mentioned this in the book. Don't be the lazy leader.
Yeah.
At the same time, model for your volunteers what it looks like to be a healthy leader. And so, there is this tension, if you will, between the two. But I think what you said is accurate. I think it's a way that we could show care to our volunteers, show care to our, staff by understanding that we all have parameters and boundaries, especially if you're a volunteer. I mean, I've been on church staff most of my life, and now, for the last, 7-ish years, I volunteer. I lead one of our teams. I have limitations. I travel oftentimes to multiple states a week, and so
Yeah.
I'm limited on what I can do. And I used to feel guilty about that, but the reality is, like, helping volunteers give their very best based on what they can do to give their very best keeps them engaged and allows you to get the best from them and with them.
I want to shift gears right now because we also present this idea of it's almost feels like it doesn't belong in the chapter, but I really do think it does. Obviously, we put it in the chapter, right? But we present this idea of showing our team movement. As a leader, our job is to show the movement. And when we were talking about this, I remember again, I don't watch sports. I play sports a little bit, right? But like there's just this metaphor of in a football game, you want to see what yard line you're on. You want to see progression.
Yeah.
And at church, we're often really good about showing the ball moving forward. Hey, the ball moved forward. Sometimes we need to like remember that like the point of the game is our vision, right? So like movement, like lateral movement does not help, right? So the ball moved to the side. The ball moved. It's exciting, right? Like we want to focus on the ball moving, but like we need to focus on what is the goal? Is the ball moving forward toward the goal or back? But also, so we're good at talking about like celebrate wins, but I think sometimes we kind of downplay or we hide when the ball's been moved backward. And I think sometimes we not handicap our team, but we probably like by denying the fact that the ball has moved backward and just focusing on the good, it creates this disconnect where our team feels like they kind of have to live in this denial world, right? Like everyone knows what's going on. Like, oh, we moved back this week. And I think it's important whenever you're talking about, again, that sports metaphor, again, that football metaphor is like the team needs to know that they lost yardage. And what that does is it galvanizes everyone to say like, hey, we need to move forward. What are we going to do to move forward after we lost yardage? And I think that's one of those things that we can invest in our team. We can support our team with is say like, hey, that didn't work. And it's sometimes not your fault, right? Like sometimes just like the economy, something happened, there was just something out of your control that moved the ball backward, but you still need to acknowledge it and say, okay, now here's the reality of where we're working with. Because the thing is, your team knows it. Your team feels it.
That's right.
But a lot of times we don't want to address it. I don't know. What do you think about that? Like where do you feel like you've seen that happen at churches where like they just kind of don't acknowledge it and it kind of, how do you feel like that hurts the team?
There's an adage in some various forms that says, activity isn't necessarily progress. And if we're not careful, we could be busy with activity, but not impactful with progress. So, listening right now, you might think, oh, we've got this new building, new program, new initiative. We're launching this new stuff. We're in the, in fall season, and there's like everybody's back to school and these new rhythms. We've got a new campaign. Like recently talked to a couple churches. They got all this new. Not knocking on the new. It's great. It looks like something is happening, but the question is our team, are our volunteers, is our church, are we actually getting closer to the vision?
Yeah.
That's the progression, right? Not
Mm.
just the activity. And so it when you're leading a team, that can feel really hard, especially if you feel like you are stalled, if you're stuck. You could often find yourself saying, I've done this. If we could just get some movement, if we could just get some movement, if we could just do something, then it would change everything. Maybe. But as you're sitting there thinking about, maybe you've got your pad right now, you've been thinking about ideas and notes, take out your little, moleskin notebook. You've been whiteboarding ideas and you feel like, man, what are the just activities? Maybe the question is, what are the activities that you can do? What are the new things that you can do? It's what would progress look like towards the vision, you know, be here on my team or in our church or in my department, whatever you work. And maybe you're a volunteer leader and you're listening to this right now and you're like, well, does this apply to me? I mean, imagine leading your team as a volunteer, leading other volunteers. Like, what does progress look like for your team?
Yeah.
Not just activity of showing up week in and week out and doing A, B, and C that you're probably great at doing, but could there be something different? And I know that one thing that we talk about is celebrating, and that can actually be a huge accelerator for your team that can be a part of progress, because sometimes people want to know, are we moving forward? Are we doing anything worthwhile? And what celebration can do, a celebration can remind people, especially when you celebrate through the lens of vision, not through the lens of the leader, it reinforces the idea that what we are doing is moving us forward toward the vision, not
Yeah.
you made me look good, you're helping me achieve my goals, right? And so
Yeah.
as a leader thinking about, man, how can I find ways for us to celebrate progress towards the vision? And that really is an incredible fuel. That's incredible fuel for particular volunteers. And it reminds them, and I know we know these things,
Yeah.
but celebrating people reminds them, hey, your contribution matters, and it helps us, as Andy Stanley says, go further faster.
Yeah. And we talked last week about the idea of having a vision, but maybe this is an appropriate place to stop and say, like, well, okay, I feel like we've had no progress anyway. And if we did have progress, I wouldn't even know if it was progress, right? And I think a helpful thing to do, and we've talked about this before on the podcast, but this is something that I do every 6 months with my company or every year with my company, is I just decide, if Sunday Social, my company, did not exist today, what would I build? Because I think a lot of times we inherit systems, we inherit progress, we inherit, the team, and then we say, okay, well, it's just my job to steward this and keep it going the same direction. But I think one of the most healthy things you can do is just say, like, imagine if Sunday Social blew up today and you were having to start something new. You could start whatever you wanted to accomplish the goal. What would you start? So, for instance, if you're leading like a guest services team, so you didn't inherit this team or you haven't been running it for the last 2 years, if you were starting a guest services team today, what would you want to change at your church through this team? And that helps you set the goal of, like, okay, now here's our new vision. This is what I want our team to look like. And then what we start doing is we start plotting simple steps to get from point A to point B. So point B is this new place that we want to go because I just blew up the team and I'm starting from scratch, right? But at the same time, we're not going to blow up the team. We're not going to just destroy everything. So now, okay, so how do I then merge A to B? How do I get from A to B? What tiny steps can I take? And I think that's one of those really helpful things you can do when you say, like, okay, hey, everyone, I know we've been A for a long time and we've been really steady with this, right? But I think we need to start becoming B. Let's start keeping B in our minds, and I'm going to start implementing tiny steps to help us get there. And that's when people start saying, okay, we can actually get to this new place. We can actually do this. And I'm starting to see us progressing toward it, which is exciting. And that starts creating that movement again, the movement that matters, like you said.
Yeah. Do I have time to give a quick illustration?
Yeah, we got like a couple minutes.
Okay. So if we've talked about, okay, vision says, hey, it's where we're going. Equipping says, hey, I want to give you the ability to get there. We touched on trust a little bit. It's like, I'm going to give you the freedom, to find your way there, and celebrating is like, hey, I want to, we're going to pause to acknowledge your contribution matters. Okay. If those things are true, what does it look like in real life? I never will forget, the stories in the book, that I joined church staff. You said inherited. I inherited hundreds of volunteers. They were on a rotation of like every 3 or 4 weeks. And so for 90 days, I studied the behaviors that they were demonstrating. And I noticed that if you miss 1 week, then you don't get to volunteer, but like every 6 to 8 weeks. And so you don't get enough reps to be excellent at what you do, which affects your confidence. You don't get to build community with people and so forth and so on. I won't give you all the details. So I decided, let's reduce the rotation to every 2 weeks. That seems very benign, so I would think, until the first day I implemented this every 2-week rotation. 210 volunteers quit. Now, you can imagine that does not do anything encouraging for one's soul.
Yeah.
Then people start emailing the pastor, people talking trash about me. People are in my face. Yeah, the church volunteers, they can be super sweet at times. And, do you know how much I give to this church? And I'm like, no, I don't even know how much I give to this church. Like, I don't. Like, but the goal was, if I could get them to show up more often, so it equaled to 7 times more per 12 months, then your confidence would grow, your competence would grow, and the community would grow.
Yeah.
So after we took this big hit of 210 people, within, I forget if it was like 60 or 90 days, we added over 300 to the team. And all of the areas that, the confidence, the competence, the community, all of that began to grow. You say, well, are you bragging on yourself? No, actually, it's not about me. I was pretty discouraged. I was deflated, and I knew somebody's going to they're like, Jason, you got to reverse course, man. People are raising a stink about you. Leadership team, pastor said, because I told them I was going to do it. They said, what do you need from us to help you to continue the work that you're doing? And I was like, what?
Yeah.
What? So it wasn't just supporting like I'm with you. It was equipping, like, what do you need to help you continue towards the progress of that mission and goal?
Yeah.
And so maybe you're listening right now, and the temptation could be to say, come on, staffer, come on, volunteer, let's do better or whatever.
Yeah.
What if you just showed up to say, hey, I'm with you. What do you need from me?
Yeah.
To help you accomplish whatever the goal or mission, assuming it's in alignment, right, with the vision. And what that did for me was amazing. And guess what? The ministry was better, not because of me, but because of the support and equipping of the pastoral team around me. And so I give them full credit for the positive impact and effects of that, not just decision, but the progress that we made collectively as a team.
Yeah, you want to talk about a likable leader is when you go into a meeting expecting to get reamed, and then your leader says, hey, how can I support you better? And you're like, not what I expected, but
that's right.
Now I love you.
That's right.
Well, hey, we hope this podcast episode was helpful. We'll be back next week with chapter 6. Whether you read, whether you don't read, we hope you get a lot of good stuff from these episodes. But follow us on social media. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already. But we'll see you next week.